Hi, I'm Maggie. I think I know some of you, and I probably will meet more of you later. We're going to talk about how you can put your garden to bed this fall for the winter time. So why do we care? Why do we care about putting our gardens to bed? There's a lot of traditional ways that we're trying to break away from, like landscaping. So we can start out by saying, why do we care? In nature, nothing exists alone. Every action we take will affect some other life form. Putting our garden to bed, what we do is crucial. Our actions will determine if an animal can survive the winter or not, and we need all the species and organisms to work together to maintain and balance life. We are here to give an outline on what we can do in our garden, but at the same time, how to provide habitat, which will increase biodiversity and bring us closer to a more balanced ecosystem. So as you can see, we have so many different life forms shown in this picture, from insects to animals to plants to people. So we all need to work together to support ourselves. So the crown method is very popular with ReWild. This acronym describes a lot of things that we can follow in the right order. So we have compost, reuse, recycle, organic gardening, water, and native plants. So we're going to start with compost. So we can compost our leaves in the fall, and we can also start a new compost pile from food scraps or finish off your composted food scraps that you've been doing throughout the season. So if you compost your food scraps, you can divert a lot of trash from going to landfills. You can put, natural material back into the earth and let it decompose. And all the nutrients that have been grown from the food that you may have not have eaten can go back into the earth or into your garden, which then goes through your other fruits and vegetables. Another thing to emphasize right now is the leaf mold piles. So it's really great to leave the leaves, which is the whole point of tonight's talk. We want to keep our leaves whole. That's definitely the best method that people have been agreeing upon. We can also cut up the leaves, like with a lawnmower or with a leaf mulch kind of, or a leaf shredder rather. And you can also rake your leaves into a pile like here, and you can have like some sort of fencing to keep them all together, and then they'll slowly break down starting from the bottom, and then you'll have some good leaf mold compost for the next season. And also a little joke saying it shouldn't be called leaf mold, it should be called leaf gold, because there's really such great nutrients in there. And sometimes people leave their grass clippings in there as well, which can provide extra nitrogen that goes to help break down the process, and then also provide great nitrogen for your garden. This process can take a year or so, maybe 2 or 3 years, depending on the type of leaf from the type of tree and how fast your leaves are breaking down. It's definitely best to have this pile in the sun so it can break down faster. In the shade, there might be not enough breakdown from the sun, or there could be like mold from fungi kicking in because there's not enough airflow, or it's really dark and not enough sun. So you probably want this in the sun. You can build this with chicken wire or turkey wire, and you can provide garden stakes and kind of hold it all together so your leaves aren't flying all over the place, and will hopefully keep the neighbors somewhat happy and not complaining. So the next crown that we have is R, so reduce, reuse, recycle, and relocate your garden supports, restore your garden tools, and we're also going to talk about plastic pots. So here, you can see that a lot of pots from gardening can build up throughout the season if you get a lot of plants from nurseries or if you grow them on your own. So a great way is to see if you can return these pots to Home Depot or Lowe's or any local nursery that might reuse these pots. It's great to definitely clean them with soap and water so you prevent any sort of diseases or bacteria or fungi being transferred. I know LINPI takes pots and we kind of sort through them and we use them throughout the season, especially gallon sizes and 4-inch pots. ReWild used to have a pot recycling program, but they stopped because there's really no outlet for them. Since ReWild doesn't grow plants like a nursery would, there's really nowhere for these pots to go. So ReWild isn't accepting pots, but you can surely give them to a neighbor and try to get them into gardening or see who else might find use for them. There's other ways you can reuse the pots, like So you can kind of put them in really big planters, so you don't have to use as much soil, and you can sink them into your garden beds and make a mini in-ground worm compost. You can also plant your mint in the garden in a pot to prevent it from spreading all over the place. So it kind of creates edging for your garden. So another part of R is to relocate. You want to put your garden supports away. So this is more for organic gardening with vegetables and fruits, but the weight of the snow and ice can damage your supports, and then you have to buy new ones, and that's not very sustainable. So you want to put those away. But another way to avoid using your garden supports for your native plants is the Chelsea chop. So this basically consists of cutting your plant basically halfway. So this works great for Joe Pye weed and goldenrod and any really tall blooming flowers. So you want to do this between mid-June and July. So no later than mid-July. You want to do this kind of right after, you know, the spring, May has really shot up those plant stems and the leaves, and it's like almost about to bloom and there's some buds there. You want to cut it halfway, and it's going to be worth it in the end because your Joe Pye weed won't be flopping over, falling over, almost touching the ground. And then that avoids the need for these garden supports. So another part of R is to restore your garden tools. So it's great to have some downtime through the fall and the winter. You can clean off your garden tools, your shovels, your pruners. You can use a steel brush or steel wool to get off rust or any sort of plant buildup that's been on there. You can sharpen your pruners. You can lubricate them with WD-40 and other sorts of good tool cleaning products. What can go hand in hand with native gardening is organic gardening. So native gardening and organic gardening of fruits and vegetables is hopefully pesticide and herbicide free. We practice integrated pest management ways, and we can use the native plants to help our vegetables be pollinated. So, you know, you have your tomato flower or your zucchini flower, and you're going to need some sort of bumblebee or some sort of pollinator to actually pollinate that flower so that you get a fruit. So it's really great if you kind of align your native garden maybe around your vegetable garden, which is what I've been doing. So I have you know, a raised bed like the one below, and then I have a bunch of native plants all around it so that it attracts even more pollinators and insects. So what you can do with your leaves also is put those leaves right on top of your garden bed. So this will avoid any other weed seeds from maybe your neighbor's backyard and all of their invasive plants and their mugwort flying into your garden bed. So you can use the leaves to kind of use it almost as like a weed fabric blanket. So you don't want to leave the soil exposed. And then with the leaves on top of the soil, it also creates nutrients breaking into the soil, preparing it all winter long for your spring growing. It's also good to soil test in the fall. You can contact Cornell Cooperative Extension for any questions on soil testing. You want to know your soil levels and your pH for specific crops that may or may not like acidity. So like blueberries and other sorts of shrubs like that. You kind of want to know what's going on in your soil if you want to have a successful fruit shrub kind of thing. So next, we're going to talk about water. Water and winter don't mix. There's a few things you can do now before the freezing temperatures set in. So you can, you know, get all your native perennials in the ground. That's for starters. You can empty your rain barrels, empty any hoses or open watering cans, buckets. The freezing water can cause structural damage to those containers. So you want to get that water out of there. So this is very important for the gardens program. So all of the gardens who've received irrigation, this is the timer, the orbit timer that you've received. So this can be removed starting now and then up until like December. So basically you screw off that black part that attaches onto the spigot. So that comes off, and then the hose part or the main line connecting to the timer would come off. And then you put your timer away in the box. You put it inside somewhere where you're hopefully going to remember it. And then you can either reattach the hose to the spigot, or you can also tape it off so that no soil can get into the main line, because then that can affect the drainage in the rest of the drip irrigation. So you want to winterize your sprinkler systems, your irrigation systems, and probably shut off your main water valve to your hoses. With your native garden beds, you can also save seeds. You can learn about winter sowing with those seeds. And you also want to leave some of them for natural food. So you can kind of use your best judgment. If you really like a plant, maybe you can take a few of those fluffy seeds and save them, and then you can, bank them, or you can grow some of them by stratifying. So we're going to get into the whole stratifying thing in a few. So you want to find the right balance of leaving the seeds, saving them, and then growing them. You can also divide your perennials in the fall. So there's a bunch of different types of ways that the plants grow. They benefit from being divided every couple of years. You want to divide it 4 weeks before your first frost date, so that way it has a little bit of time to get established and reestablish where its new home will be. And then you can do it on, yes, definitely on overcast days and before the rain. You don't want to sit there in the direct sunlight breaking apart these plants that are really going to dry out quickly. So we can also save your native plant seeds. So this is a great way to increase genetic diversity. So instead of cloning your plants by doing cuttings, you can, create individual plants from these seeds. It's also an economical way to propagate your plants. So instead of buying them or sourcing them yourself from other people, you can kind of go into your garden or in nature if you really want and try to find what you want to grow. You want to pick seeds when they're dry, so you don't want to go collecting in your garden after rain. Mold is your worst enemy when it comes to collecting seeds. So you want to store them in a dry area, definitely like a paper bag. You want to avoid plastic bags. You can collect in a plastic bag while you're in the field, but then as soon as you kind of get home to label, you want to let it dry out completely, because water will create mold in your seed saving. You can look for local resources, CCE, Seed Saving Library Talk, and ReWild blog posts. Winter sowing, ReWild has a webinar talking about winter sowing. So basically, stratification and winter sowing exposes the seed as it would in nature. So you're exposing it to a cold, moist environment that's contained. So you can stratify seeds in soil in a bag that's labeled, or you can directly sow them into pots like this. There's also the milk jug seed sowing that I've done before, which is really fun. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. So we went through most of our CROWN acronym. The main points is to spread a blanket over the garden of your leaves. So any leaves that fall from the trees, you basically want to leave them in your garden or kind of rake them into your garden or put them in your leaf mold pile. You can also find a do not disturb sign or make your own. So you can kind of put this in your garden to notify your neighbors that, you're not just a lazy gardener, that it's there for a reason, and try to maybe teach them about that and teach them not to hire landscapers to blow the leaves all around with gas-powered machinery. So this is an example of how your garden can look with the leaves. It's really pretty. It's better than having, big chunky wood chips sourced from who knows where. So you want to aim to have 2 to 3 inches of leaves in place over your soil. You want to avoid covering any green rosettes that could be growing, like the middle parts. And you do want to cut some diseased leaves and stems. So if you see like some weird yellow or brown spots on your leaves, you can cut that just to avoid any sort of contamination. So this is just a little ecological picture here. So here's like an example of some plants just left as they are. So your seed heads are there, the snow is just laying on them, and the birds can still find some sources of food. This is really interesting with So instead of cutting your plant stems all the way to the ground, you can actually cut them a couple of certain inches high, and the bees actually nest in these stems, which is really cool. So yeah, if you leave, habitat available, the animals will find it and they'll know what to do, basically. Here's some more information. So our last letter in our acronym for CROWN is nature. So nature is all about observing. So you can discover on your own and explore. While things are dormant, you can still look for berries on a shrub or seed heads or where the birds are gravitating towards most. And you can look for overwintering insects, or you can look inside those stems that you've left to see if there's any bees that are trying to find a home in there. And then just to wrap up, we have because we care. We care because we want the whole ecosystem to work in unity and the people, plants, and insects to all work together and just be happy. So that's it. It's the end of our presentation. This is some additional resources that will be made available. There's some links that you can learn more about, and definitely leave your leaves and do the right things to clean up your garden in the winter, in the fall, and you'll be good.
Thank you, Maggie.
Welcome.
That was very nice, concise, and
Thanks.
we get the point across.
Yes.
So if anybody, if you have a question, please put it in the chat and we can have Maggie answer them for us. So one of the questions was, when is our frost date? And I think it's different. I think there's a website that you can look up. If you put in your zip code, you can actually look up your frost date. All right.
Yes, it's probably even further into the season at this point. So.
And Laurie wants to know, is it better to put shredded leaves directly back into the garden in the fall, or store them in bags and then spread them in spring?
I would say, you don't really need to have plastic in the equation. You can kind of just leave everything outside and do what it needs to do. Shredded leaves or whole leaves are good. You can leave them in the garden, or you can leave them in a pile. I wouldn't recommend storing leaves inside a garage, because then, mold again will come back and haunt you because there's less airflow and it's dark in there. So then you're just going to have moldy leaves, and it's not the right kind of leaf mold. So definitely leave everything outside.
Gloria would like to know, what are the biggest mistakes that people make in their gardens for winter prep?
I think the biggest mistake is cutting everything to the ground, because then you're not providing any sort of habitat. Birds are making nests all year long, or they have their certain mating times. So you want to leave those sticks around. A very clean looking garden, very pristine, all turf grass, doesn't provide any habitat for those birds. And also any way for the bees to lay their nests inside those stems. So definitely leave, your plants up until at least late spring. And then when you really need to clean up your garden in May, when you're right about to plant, the best thing to do is just leave everything as long as you can without it being too much of an eyesore for yourself.
So yes, talking about plants and plant stems. So Sharon, she would like some clarification. Should the plants get pruned, left alone, or cut halfway? I think it's a matter of timing. Would you like to talk about when to prune them, when not to prune them?
So your plants start to grow. So you plant your plants in May, in the springtime. They start to grow, and then they get tall. And then that Chelsea chop time is late spring, early summer. That's when you cut them halfway, because then they'll branch off even more and create more blooms. And those blooms won't weigh down the plant. So it'll be a shorter plant with more blooms, and it'll be nicer contained. So let your plant grow, cut it halfway if you need to. This doesn't apply for all plants. I wouldn't cut anything that's woody halfway. You want to leave all of your woody stems growing, unless it's a dead little stem. So and then leave it alone until the springtime, basically leave it alone all winter.
And Sierra would like to know, what if we have no leaves available? Anything we could do to cover the soil?
Yeah, so if you don't have a lot of trees in your backyard, I mean, I see those leaf bags on like the side of the road. I mean, that's so tempting to like steal someone's leaves, but maybe you can ask your neighbor or someone that you know for leaves. Or you can get, I guess you can buy, like a Hampton Bays brand or like a Long Island soil if you really want to. And you can also cover your vegetable beds with like black weed fabric. Basically, it kind of gives itself a chance to recycle itself. So any black weed fabric, you can cover your garden bed, or you can outsource your leaves somehow if you don't have any.
Yes, and the fabric weed barrier should be taken off in the springtime. It should
Yeah.
not be a permanent solution.
Yeah, it's just like a prevention for those seeds that are flying around.
Yes. So Diana would like to have a little more clarification, especially on asters. Should I leave my aster intact or should I cut them, and when? And also for sunflower, should I leave the sunflower stalks intact or cut them?
I would definitely leave the asters because that will still provide the seed heads for throughout the winter time. So you can leave them, you can leave that. And the sunflower stalks, I usually would clean those up. That's more of like an annual kind of flower. So they're not going to be coming back every year. You replant those. So I would remove those from my garden personally, but if you want to leave them to create habitat, you can do that too. But you don't have to leave them if you don't want to, but they are a very thick stalk. So maybe that will provide a very specific location for a specific insect.
Yes. And the sunflower we should differentiate between an annual and a perennials.
Mm-hmm.
What if you have no trees or very few leaves? Is mulch the best blanket? Or when is the best time to cut back perennials?
Yeah, if you don't have a lot of trees and leaves, I think you can definitely use mulch. Get some mulch, make sure it's clean and kind of sterile. I know towns offer mulch that's free, but I've heard a couple horror stories saying that that mulch has been contaminated with, different sorts of invasive seeds. So just be careful where you're getting your mulch from. If you don't feel like spending money on it, just be careful. If it's too free, then it might not be clean, or you can buy some mulch from the store. Just make sure it's not dyed mulch, anything black, brown, or red. Just be, natural kind of color.
Do you have an example of woody plants, what's not to chop?
So anything woody would be like a shrub or a tree. So like a bayberry bush or a aronia shrub or a clethra, anything with a woody stem, you don't want to really cut that back because that's permanent growth there. And those woody stems will actually create new little leaf nodes, and then leaves will appear, and then the flowers will appear. So you don't want to cut those back at all. You want to just cut the grasses or the flowers. So,
and in terms of organic gardening, like our vegetable garden, like would compost or cover crop helps with not leaving the soil bare through the winter time?
oh yeah, people will get like a cover crop. It's usually like a type of legume. So you can sow that and it'll appear and it'll have green leaves. And then in the springtime, it'll kind of die back into the soil and release more nitrogen in your soil. So you could definitely do a cover crop. I know they're kind of hard to find and there aren't really any native cover crops. So you kind of have to get away from the native part with that, but you can buy a cover crop. That's a type of legume usually.
And ReWild Long Island had a webinar about no-till gardening, which covers a lot of information on cover crops.
Mm-hmm.
So that's up on our website if anybody would like to know more about that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question. This is a very good one. Can I use shredded cardboard and newspapers to mulch?
That's definitely a good idea. I haven't really thought about that because I have too many trees to even worry about not using the leaves. That could be a great idea. I think newspapers are good. Newspapers can decompose. They're really thin, and shredded cardboard, give it a try. Why not?
And is it too late to separate plant this fall? Would it be possible to separate them in the spring, or best wait until next fall?
So you can plant in the spring and the fall, and you can separate plants in the spring and the fall as well. So it might be a little late now because we don't really have that too many hot days left. You know, it's kind of getting into the freezing temperatures. So you could give it a try. I would definitely just do it in the spring, and I think you'll have good results for sure.
Are there any perennials, herbaceous plant that you would recommend for direct fall seed sowing rather than winter sowing in containers? Is there more a particular seed out there that just like to be in the ground instead of, you know, us putting it in a pot?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I mean, like when you sow in a container, you're kind of in a more controlled environment. You're growing it in a nursery kind of area. People want to kind of sprinkle seeds and then hope for the best. And usually it doesn't really work that way unless you really cover it with good soil and you really watch over that area. I know people just want to sprinkle seeds, but then they get frustrated that nothing grows, is because you really have to have a good media for that. You really want good fluffy soil that's not compact, and you want a layer on top of those seeds. And the problem with kind of sprinkling the seeds direct sowing is animals can find those seeds and kind of move them around. So if you do want to directly seed, I would pick a specific area and really keep an eye on it instead of just kind of sprinkling it in your lawn or something like that. I don't really have any specific species recommended. I just would recommend that practice of just kind of really looking at that specific area.
What kind of seeds can be saved now to easily grow next spring?
So you can do any like grass seeds, like little blue stem, big blue stem, switchgrass. You can do any asters. They're really fluffy right now. So you can collect asters from your garden. There's also berries. So if you have any aronia berries or bayberries, which would take a while to get established, but any sort of berries, you can save those and just clean them up.
Would that be growing next spring, or because the question was specific to save now and grow next spring?
Yeah, so if you kind of harvest them now, you can stratify them in the next couple of days or weeks, and then they'll grow in the spring.
And if I don't care about yard appearance, is there any ecological plant health reason to not just leave the leaves wherever they fall, as opposed to putting them in pies or in garden?
I think it's fine if you want to leave them wherever they fall. I just know people like their yards to look a certain way, or if there's too many leaves on the grass, then your grass will die back. So if you want to leave them wherever they fall, it kind of turns into like a little forest. So that's totally fine, and it has an ecological benefit. So the insects and whatever animals use that leaf litter will just use it where it is.
There's another question about cutting back. So Joe pie weed and goldenrod, for example, do we cut back now for stem habitat or leave until spring and then cut back?
Yeah, so I guess like if you want to leave the seeds for a little bit longer, that's why you leave the plants, and then you can cut them back, and then that will create the habitat for like the bees. So the Joe pie weed and the goldenrod example, that was like for the Chelsea chop in the early summer, but now you kind of just leave things with the seeds, and then you can cut it back to like those specific inches for the bumblebee laying or the egg laying from insects, and then you can leave those. And if you wanted, what was the second part?
Oh, she said she have a lot of asters that has volunteered, and she's trying to dig up and gather to replant them in a spot. So it's
Yeah.
you definitely do like to regroup your plants at some point.
Yeah, they can get big after you sometimes I sometimes plant things too close together, and then they get really big, and then I'm like, okay, I guess it is time to relocate.
And that's the questions we have for now. Thank you, Maggie. That was wonderful information. And I love it. And leaving the stem and leaving the leaves just go well together. The
Mhm.
stem catches the leaves and it doesn't really blow away or around that much once you start. So it's
Right.
a great method and I love that.
Yes, me too.